100 meters deep, freezing water, and no way out. This is the true story of one of the most dangerous cave rescues ever attempted. In 2014, 2 divers died in Norway's most dangerous underwater cave systems. Any recovery mission would be deadly. But for these divers, the real danger wasn't the freezing water, the narrow tunnels, or the crushing pressure. It was the promise they made: never leave a friend behind. So they did the unthinkable. What exactly happened? This is their story. On February 6, 2014, a team of 5 Finnish divers set out to explore the popular Plura Cave at the end of the Plurdalen Valley in central Norway. Their goal was simple but ambitious: to traverse the Plura Cave system from one entrance to another, emerging in a remote mountain lake called Steinugleflaget. The Plura Cave was a cave known for its breathtaking but challenging underwater tunnel. It was filled with a labyrinth of icy tunnels, jagged rock formations, and pitch-black water. Beyond this underground pocket of water is another cave called the Cave of Steinugleflaget. 90 meters above this cave is an exit, which is a crack in a collapsed side of a hill. However, moving from Plura to Steinugleflaget is only for the highly trained and experienced divers because of the terrible risks involved. But these divers were not new to the risks involved. They were professionals in cave diving, one of the most dangerous sports in the world. The divers Patrick Gronkvist, Jari Huotarinen, and their friends had explored the depths of the Ojamo mine in Finland and even discovered the passage between Plura and Steinugleflaget caves the year before. But this particular dive would push them to their limits. Their plan demanded complete accuracy. The dive would take 5 hours, reach depths of over 130 meters, and test every bit of their skill and courage. All divers had to work together, controlling oxygen levels, navigating, and facing the cold, dark depths that lay ahead. The team had been practicing for years, and their expertise gave them assurance. But the Plura Cave had its own rules, and on this day, it would demand the ultimate price. The first divers to descend were Patrick Gronkvist and Jari Huotarinen. 2 hours later, after the sediment raised by the first divers had been allowed to settle, 3 of their friends followed behind. They were experienced divers, but the Plura Caves were unforgiving. At such depths, the cold was paralyzing, and the risk of equipment failure or carbon dioxide poisoning was ever present. As they navigated the narrow, twisting tunnels, disaster struck. Approximately 1 hour into the dive, just after the 2 had navigated through the deepest part and were around 110 meters beneath the cave entrance at Plura, Gronkvist noticed that Huotarinen was no longer following him. He returned and discovered that his friend was trapped in a narrow part of the cave, caught in a cord attached to some of his gear. He was using his torch to signal distress. Huotarinen started to panic because of his condition, which meant he risked breathing too fast. In cave diving, panic is dangerous. It leads to fast breathing, confusion, and poor decision-making. At such depths, there's no room for error. To help him, Gronkvist gave Huotarinen a cylinder of gas to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in his system. But while Huotarinen was switching mouthpieces, he started helplessly swallowing water and ultimately died. Gronkvist was shocked, but getting agitated would put Gronkvist himself at risk of carbon dioxide poisoning, which would have serious consequences. After a brief effort to free the body, he forced himself to calm down. Gronkvist was faced with an impossible choice: stay and risk his own life, or continue the dive to survive. With a heavy heart, he left Huotarinen's body behind and pressed on towards Steinugleflaget very slowly. Unfortunately, the other divers were unaware of the tragedy unfolding below. Vesa Rantanen, Jari Usamaki, and Kai Kankanen followed behind, with Vesa Rantanen being in front. When Rantanen got to where Huotarinen's body was, he had 2 options: try to pass beside the body or go back. He eventually decided the best option was for him to pass beside the body. It took him 15 minutes to struggle past Huotarinen's body, and he met up with Gronkvist. However, his struggle to go past the dead body had added 3 hours to his decompression time. Decompression time is the required stops during ascent to safely release absorbed gases and prevent decompression sickness. But Rantanen had begun to run low on gas, and he had to escape to the surface 80 minutes early. This led to him suffering pains in his knees and elbow as a result of decompression sickness. The sickness grew steadily to become very serious in the following hours. Rantanen later discovered that as he was struggling to pass Hiotaranen's body, Jari Usimaki, the diver behind him, was also experiencing difficulty. It's believed that Usimaki panicked when he arrived at the scene of the first accident. Kai Kankanen, the fifth and final diver, tried to help Usimaki, but unfortunately, all his efforts were unsuccessful. Kankanen didn't really remember how it had happened. But unlike Vesa Rantanen, Kankanen chose not to proceed to Steinugleflaget. Instead, he turned around and swam the long distance back to his starting location. He eventually emerged from the cave in the early hours of the next day, more than 11 hours after setting out on a dive that was supposed to take 5 hours. By the time he reached Plura, he had to break a thin layer of ice to climb out of the water. While the bodies of Hiotaraneen and Usimaki remained in the cave, Grönqvist, Rantanen, and Kankanen were hospitalized because of the decompression sickness. They told the Norwegian authorities their stories, and the Plura Cave was closed as a result. Not long after, Rick Stanton, a popular British diver known for his rescue and recovery works in caves, reached out to help recover these dead divers. He felt he had enough expertise and experience to pull off the recovery mission. 2 weeks later, after receiving help from the Norwegian authorities, Rick Stanton and 2 other British divers, John Volanthen and Jason Mallinson, dived into Steinugleflaget cave. But when they went down to check out the site of the accident, they discovered that Hiotaraneen could not be readily freed from the Steinugleflaget side, and he had blocked access to the second victim, Usimaki. The only option was to repeat the diving journey from Plura entirely, thereby reaching the victim from the opposite side. This was a very dangerous option, even for the most experienced rescue and recovery divers. It could take hours, and there was no guarantee it wouldn't lead to new casualties. Stanton and his diving colleagues discussed it. They examined the caves and what it would require to carry out their recovery by diving from Plura. But after much deliberation, they concluded it was too risky for them to do that, so they gave up. As a result of this, the Norwegian authorities canceled the recovery efforts. For most, that would be the end of the story, a tragic accident, an impossible recovery. But for the divers, it was unacceptable. Hiotaraneen and Usimaki were more than just fellow divers. They were brothers in adventure, in risk, in passion. Leaving them behind just wasn't an option. If no one would bring them home, they would do it themselves. Grönqvist made a promise to Hiotaraneen's wife that they would get the bodies home one way or another. What followed was one of the most daring and dangerous recovery missions in diving history. The surviving team members of the original diving team, despite the trauma of what had happened, planned a secret mission to recover their fallen friends. All 3 survivors would be involved, and another diver named Pakarinen, who was once a tutor and friend to the dead divers. They knew the risks. They knew they could die trying, but they couldn't live with the thought of leaving Hiotaraneen and Usimaki behind. They knew that there was a chance that part of Northern Europe's biggest wet cave system would remain closed to the sport forever if they failed. They had to plan the recovery mission in secret. They knew the Norwegian authorities wouldn't give them permission if they requested it. They had one clear advantage over the British rescue team. They had gone through the Plura Cave before. They were confident they could reach the bodies from the Plura side, cut Hiotaraneen's body free, and guide both of them to the surface. But there was a disadvantage too. The men knew the victims they would be rescuing. How would they react when they came to the site of the accident and had to handle their corpses? Won't they become upset and breathe more quickly, or make a silly mistake that could lead to another tragedy? For this reason, they tried to process all the emotional stuff in the month leading up to the rescue, so that when the time came, they could focus on the task at hand, working almost like robots. On March 22, 2014, almost 2 months after the incident, a group of 27 people arrived in Plurdalen to carry out the recovery mission. There were 17 Finns and 10 Norwegians. 2 support diving teams would operate at shallower depths at each end of the traverse, while Grönqvist, Pakarinen, and Kankanen would dive again to the cave's deepest area to lift the bodies. Vesa Rantanen, who is still healing from a spinal injury due to his decompression sickness, served as the surface manager. This time, they played it safe. The initial phase of the 5-day mission involved transporting over a ton of equipment into the cave at Steinugleflaget, gradually hoisting it up a cable to the mountain. The plan was for the divers to enter from the Plura side and release Hyötyaranen's body from his tangled lines at a depth of 120 meters, and move both of the bodies to the Steinugleflaget dry cave. Then, Uusimaki's body would be recovered the following day. The only way to get the bodies out of the cave was to cut their gear loose underwater. The team calculated that they would have around 10 to 15 minutes in which to free the first body. The first dive was expected to take at least 7 hours, and it would become more dangerous every passing minute. If something went wrong and the divers were unable to navigate the narrow passage in which the first body was stuck, the team would have to endure a potentially deadly 10-hour dive. But to minimize the risk, they built a safety habitat on the Plura side for safer decompression. On March 24, 2014, they slipped once again beneath the icy lid of Plura. But after descending for about 85 meters, Kankkunen returned to the surface and explained that he wasn't in the right frame of mind for the operation. With no other option, Pakarinen and Grönqvist continued the descent alone. Eventually, they passed the floating body of Uusimaki. Then, just a bit further, they encountered Hyötyaranen's body, exactly as Grönqvist had left him 7 weeks earlier. With steady hands, they cut him free and began the long, perilous journey to the surface. Using specialized equipment, including underwater scooters, rebreathers, and guidelines, the team painstakingly transported the body through the treacherous passages. It was a mission that tested their courage, their skills, and their friendship. Grönqvist got to the surface first in Steinugleflaget, where Vesa Rantanen was waiting to meet him. They had successfully recovered the first body. The next day, Grönqvist and Pakarinen went back to collect Uusimaki's body, assisted by another diver named Jani Santala. This time, the team started their recovery journey from Steinugleflaget. This one turned out to be more challenging than they expected. This body was heavier and less manageable than the first. The task of freeing the body was delicate and dangerous. Every moment had to be precise to avoid damaging the body or risking their own safety. Pakarinen took the lead, carefully cutting away the equipment that had trapped the body, but the cave had other plans. As they worked, part of the cave wall collapsed, nearly trapping Pakarinen in the process. It was a heart-stopping moment. It was supposed to be a recovery mission, not a death mission. However, Pakarinen managed to keep calm to free himself and continue the mission. With Uusimaki's body finally free, the team began the long, slow journey to the surface. Grönqvist and Pakarinen worked together, maneuvering the body through the narrow tunnels and guiding it toward the exit. It was a grueling process, but they refused to give up. After hours of decompression stops, the team finally surfaced at Steinugleflaget. The mission was complete, but the emotional toll was undeniable. Both victims were carried up to Steinugleflaget, where they were put into body bags that Grönqvist had retrieved from the fire station where he worked. In their honor, the group held a moment's silence in the beautiful cave. The recovery mission had taken 101 hours of diving time. The team had risked everything to bring their friends home, and they had succeeded, but the mission wasn't without consequences. The next afternoon, they went to report to the local police station. Pakarinen sensed that the police were pleased that they recovered the bodies, but since they did it without seeking permission, they had to be investigated. The Norwegian police investigated their illegal dive for 6 months, but in the end, no charges were filed. For the families, it was a chance to grieve and find closure. The Plura Caves are open once again, but the memory of Hyötyaranен and Uusimaki lives on. For the divers, the mission was about more than just recovering bodies. It was about honoring a promise and proving that no one gets left behind. What would you have done in their place? Let us know in the comments below. If you were inspired by this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more incredible tales of courage and adventure.